I just have about 10 minutes here before a student arrives, and I wanted to cover something and discuss something with y'all. The way I teach and what I teach is a curricular-based training method on Filipino martial arts. Very base system, covers double stick, single stick, stick and dagger, and single knife, primarily in the first, say, 7 levels. After that, we get into more different aspects, but primarily what we're teaching is a base structure of strikes, a base structure of riposte. We don't like the term defense, but there are defensive motions in the base level because you need that. And then we have disarms and counter disarms and those kinds of things. And people say, well, the disarms, I don't know if they work. Well, if you study the curriculum up to green belt, you might think, oh man, these disarms are going to be hard because you're trying to ask me to block a strike and then take the weapon away. Well, no. Yeah, in the green belt level, you're really not putting in preemptive strikes and what we call strikes before and during and after the technical element. Those are reserved for later on. When you get to the 4th level, you will always be hitting, and a disarm will come out maybe on the 3rd motion, right? So I probably already hit the person's hand. I probably already hit their body. I probably already hit their free hand. I probably jabbed them in the face once, and maybe now I'm deflecting and disarming that as appropriate to my position. In other words, I've hit the guy a few times. He's staggering in. He's too close to swing the stick anyway, but he tries. So I'm able to take that weapon away because he's off balance and he's out of gas or out of fire, but he still has will. In another case, you might now get into an exchange if you're afraid to attempt or take the weapon, that you're letting him hit you and you're hitting him. So we want to have the ability to take that weapon when it's offered to us. It's not an intent that I'm going to take the weapon in the context of Filipino martial arts. Now, when I step away from Filipino martial arts, although I retain my skills and abilities, I have to understand I won't have a stick and my opponent has a stick. I can carry a baton and do carry a baton. However, my opponent probably won't have a baton. So having the baton against baton disarm skill set isn't really relevant. But as my wonderful friend Bill Zeeson mentioned, I need to have the ability to counter a disarm. So I need to train counter disarms because I have the weapon and he does not. What are they going to try to do? That person that is going to try to take my baton, because I'm probably hitting them with it. Or at least they see it as an intent to hit, so they're going to grab a hold of that, or they're going to try to grab me or grab the baton. And you have to take into consideration that if I'm dealing with one person, he might have a friend or 2 friends or 5 friends. I've been in situations where I stepped out onto a dance floor to remove a person, and I was instantly surrounded by about 7 or 8 of his friends. That was their turf. I'm the odd guy out there, and I'm working alone. So yes, I have a baton, but there are 7 people, including the guy who I'm trying to deal with because he's smoking. We're in a no smoking area. Well, now you have a different context, and that's what a lot of my fine friends that have these opinions on what a Filipino martial art should look like or should be like is it's from the context of Filipino martial arts. And that's fine because maybe that's the world we live in. That's the world I lived in. Teaching for 17 years without working a job. So you're not often, outside the context of, let's see how this works. I understand how to make that work in that environment too. I understand why we have things that we have in our structure. And I understand some people don't have those in their structure, and I'm okay with that. Although I'm going to retain the ability to take away a weapon, and I'm going to retain the ability to retain my weapon or retrieve it if it's taken away. So disarm training, I think, is completely necessary and relevant. You just have to have the proper context, and oftentimes it's not in the proper context. You probably, struck the guy and hit him, and now you have to defend. And he's already, as my instructor would say, he's already at 50% now, and you're taking the weapon. He's not at 100%. He can't even swing the weapon through because the distance is primarily inside of the power arc of that weapon. So that's something that I think you should consider when you're talking about what works and what doesn't work, is in what context are you applying that technical element or principle. It's just like, the principle of defending the snake at long range is to hit the hand. Pardon me. The principle of defending the snake at largo is to hit the hand. Well, if I'm this close to you, hit my hand. You're not going to hit my hand. A lot of the combat is taking place inside of that range. That's what a lot of people say. Well, it's up close and personal. Well, you have where'd you get the weapon? You retrieved it, and then now you had the space. That's another thing. But you're holding the weapon, and you're going to clock somebody. It's going to be so quick. That person's best defense is to step inside of that, not to step away. And we teach that as a primary move, but we assume that there's always enough space. Yesterday I did a 3-day camp, actually, not just yesterday. It wasn't 3 days yesterday, but yesterday was the third day of a camp, excuse me, that I did. And we set up an area where we coned it off, and I actually intended to build a room for that, but didn't transpire. So we coned this off, this area over here, this small area. And we did the training inside that small area. And what you see and come to realize is there's no backing up. There's very little side-to-side movement. You might get a 6-inch step back. So sometimes it's better to go forward. And so you have to apply that in different contexts. Then we set it up where it was very narrow, so you're between two cars. And we could use the cars, but who wants the mirrors broken off their car and the window busted and the door scratched? So this creates another context. Now put two people against you in that same small area. And I have some video on it, and I may share that out. We got to go through the process of, it's hours and hours of film. So we may share that out, but and what this program is, we call it off the X. And off the X, if you know in military terms, means you have something going on, you're in an ambush, you get off the X, or you have artillery fire coming. You can't stop that, you can't block it, right? Much like with a full power swing, you don't want to be in between that trying to block that. You should be hitting and maybe get in when the thing's dying and trying to come back. But being on the X is very dangerous. And so we learn how to create space where no space exists. And that's one of the things we do inside that program. There's a lot of movement, but the movement is also trained to do within a confined space. Often an armed officer operates in different parameters than a civilian. However, civilians can find themselves in situations where they might be protecting their family or might be protecting another person that's a friend, or maybe they're protecting property. Maybe they're protecting their front door so people can't gain access. So now you're essentially performing as if you have that responsibility. And I think that more people will understand each other's martial art if they would put themselves in that context. I'm not a big fan of ground grappling anymore. Simply because, in that environment when there's more than one person, it's really difficult. And I've done it with more than one person and not in training, bro. I mean, I've done it for real, and it's punishing when you have two people that are bigger than you. And even though you're trained and skilled in grappling, it's not going to go your way, at least until you get back on your feet. And that's what I found out in a hurry. And I told my grappling instructor, I said, geez, I took this guy down like nothing. But then I realized this isn't working. He goes, you're an idiot. Why'd you take him down? You're in a street fight. You're not in the gym. I was like, you should have told me that, Seafood. But we don't discuss context in the gym. Self-defense instructors often discuss context. Many of them do not do enough skill building training because they're spending a lot of time discussing context. They make fun of people who would do, say, a Sinawali drill. So they're doing a double stick drill and they say, it's just bullshit, it's drills. It is bullshit, but it's not bullshit. Because it creates a skill base that you probably wouldn't have otherwise. And I made a post talking about disarming in context, and the person said, I did disarms well before I ever did any martial arts training in real life. And I know I did too. And it sure as hell helps a lot to have a skill set to fall back on if the need arises to take a weapon away from somebody, particularly a sharp weapon. and Filipino martial arts, I love Filipino martial arts. I'm grateful for Filipino martial arts. Saved my life. But we always train, or mostly train, in context of same, or even Steven, I like to call it. In other words, if I have a stick, you have a stick. If my stick's 28, yours is 28. If mine's 24, yours is 24. If I have a knife, you have a knife. If I have a knife, if I have two knives, you have two knives. If I have two sticks, you have two. If I have a stick and knife, you have a stick and knife. If we're going empty hands, we're both empty hands. Although there will be some empty hand against knife training, there's not a lot of empty hand against sword training. Oh, you won't survive that. Well, you fucking well better, because you don't have a choice if he has a machete and you don't have shit. Or maybe you're armed and you have a gun, but the machete's already in flight and you didn't see it coming. And that's the problem that people don't understand. You put this thing on the mat, you put it under these certain conditions, but bro, you didn't see the machete, you didn't see the knife, you didn't see the gun, you don't see it until it's right there. So you better have a solution for that. Because if you don't have a solution, all the shit you say about this won't work, that won't work, well, it better work. And people say, well, if you're fighting two people, then you're dead. Really? Because I've done it, right? I'm not dead. So what are you talking about? Maybe you're talking about it from the perspective that you have. And I'm not invalidating that. I'm just saying, have you been there in that situation where you had to do it? That will change your point of view quite a bit. Because I didn't have a choice but to walk up to that car and stop the car with my body, with my presence. Not a choice that I made. Didn't have a choice. So think about that. I may cut this into smaller sections because I know I'm not supposed to go more than 3 minutes. In fact, 15 seconds is too much. But my student will be here in about 4 minutes, so I'm going to go. I thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. We need your support. Thank you.